Well, good morning. It is Saturday morning, 10 a.m. at Pasco, Washington, and it is Meals with Melissa. I actually have a really great option for you today. You know, I know I'm doing a lot of kind of more dessert-oriented ideas, but honestly, I have a sweet tooth, and not only that, I've had a lot of people pop on and say, you know, I'm really struggling with what to do when my cravings strike, and so I'm trying to come up with some really great ideas that are super easy and also that are easy to store and then take with you. So today we're gonna do low-carb brownie bites. These are also gluten-free. And they're really good. You know, I find it really interesting. Some people really struggle with making a healthier version of certain things because, of course, it doesn't taste the same. And of course it doesn't, right? Because sugar is just that. It's something that is addicting. It does light up the same part of the brain as cocaine. It actually hits your dopamine receptors. So, you know, that's something that we need to be very mindful of, is that sugar really is addicting. And so the more that we can clean up our food, our diets, you know, the things that we put into our bodies, the more likely we'll be okay with things that don't taste quite as sweet or they're a little more healthy for us. So that's what I've been working on, is coming up with healthier versions of some things that I really like. And of course, brownies. Who doesn't like brownies? So today we are making low-carb brownie bites. Super simple. I am going to actually make the majority of it in my food processor. Now, not gonna lie, I've actually had some real difficult situations with food processors. They don't ever tend to work for me. So this is a KitchenAid processor. I'm hoping that it lasts. I've actually used it a few times. So super easy to make. I made a half batch last night so that I can show you what it looks like, but we're gonna put it together and literally it's gonna take us about 5 minutes. We're gonna throw it in the freezer and then it's gonna be ready to go for whatever you got going on for the day. So let me give you the recipe. I will post it down below so that if it's something that you would like to try, you absolutely are welcome to do so. So in my food processor, cool little food processor here. I'm actually doing a half batch, but I will tell you the full batch recipe. So you're gonna do 1 cup of either pecans or almonds. You could do walnuts. Walnuts are a little higher in carbs, so I recommend something, you know, like I'm doing almonds just because that's something that we normally have on hand. So I'm gonna throw that in there with just a little bit of sea salt. Now it calls for an 1/8 teaspoon, which of course is not a whole lot, and most of us don't even have an 1/8 teaspoon measure. I don't even have one. So I'm actually just gonna do a pinch, okay? And I'm actually gonna pulse that really quick in my food processor. Now, even this food processor is giving me a little bit of a challenge, but hopefully it does what it's supposed to do today. So it's a little noisy. Perfect, okay. All right, and I'm just gonna start adding to that. So the next thing that I'm going to add is 1/4 cup cocoa powder. Now again, I'm halving my recipe, so I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons, which is actually half of a 1/4 of a cup. And of course, this is unsweetened. And you could use a dark option. I know Hershey's makes their special dark powder, but this honestly tastes great. Okay, so I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons, which of course, your end of the recipe, if you're making a full batch, is 1/4 cup. Okay, and then I'm going to add my nut butter. So I'm actually adding almond butter. You could use peanut butter. Really, guys, you gotta watch for the sugar. That's gonna be the problem. I've had a lot of people say, well, you know, I'll only eat Jif. Yeah, check the label and see how much sugar that has. I like to grind my own, both my almond butter and my peanut butter at our local Winco, because that way I know that there's no added sugars to it. So it calls for a 1/2 cup of almond or peanut butter, and of course I'm using almond butter. And this actually is a really good binder because it's gonna kind of, you know, when we made those energy bites not too long ago, you end up with little ball shaped, kind of look like cake pops, but they're not really cake. Okay, but the almond butter, the peanut butter will bind that together pretty well. I'm also going to add, let's see, 1/4 of a cup of, this is pure, okay, so this is granulated stevia. You could also use Swerve or erythritol. I have found that this works just great. Now, it's pretty intense, so be sure that whatever recipe that you're using, if you're substituting this in, that you really figure out what the transfer is, what how much of it's really gonna be so that it's not overpowering. But this calls for 1/4 of a cup. So like I said, I'm half batching it, so I'm gonna do two tablespoons. And I've already tasted these, so I already know that these are super awesome. Like I said, really super easy to make, and of course with this hot weather, you can keep them in the freezer. They'll last a little bit longer as long as you keep them in an airtight container. Okay, so I'm actually gonna blend these together. Actually, let me throw a little bit of vanilla in there. Okay, so I'm gonna add a half a teaspoon of vanilla, which is the regular batch recipe. Okay, now I'm gonna pulse those together. Again, it's gonna be a little noisy. There we go. I'm just gonna give that a minute. Yeah, looking pretty good. Okay. So to that, just to actually help a little bit for the extra binding of the granules of this, I'm gonna add a little bit of coconut flour. Now, a little harder to find, a little more expensive, but of course completely gluten-free. I use a lot at this point of almond flour and of coconut flour, and fortunately, not too long ago, a good friend of mine, Emily, came upon some and gave me some, so I've got a pretty good batch on hand, which has been really fun for making all these new recipes. Because of course you know I'm gonna try them before I give them to you. Okay, so I'm gonna throw that in there along with a half a cup, actually a fourth of a cup of chocolate chips. Now, you could also use you could use cocoa nibs, you could use carob chips, whatever works for you. And yes, this is gonna throw a little bit of sugar in there. You can alleviate that. You don't have to necessarily put that in there. But I'm not putting a whole lot in there. All right, so I'm gonna finish mixing that together. And I'm also gonna take a second to go ahead and scrape the sides down just to make sure that I'm getting all of what's combined at the bottom. So I'll take a second, and so we've got a little bit of the almond butter on the side. So I wanna make sure that these hold together when I put them into balls on my parchment paper on my tray. And of course, like I said, this is a much smaller food processor than I intended on getting, but I've had such bad luck with it that I figured if it worked, I was gonna hold on to it. All right. I'm gonna scrape out just the last little bit of the almond butter that was in my measuring cup. I'm also gonna stick just a little bit more. I discovered last night I had a little bit of trouble keeping it together, having it bind together. So I also on the side here, just in case I need it, have a little bit of coconut oil, which I did use a little bit of last night. But we'll try it really quick first. All right. Almost done, guys. Okay, so I found this was a little bit easier if I actually dumped it into a bowl instead of trying to take it out of the food processor itself. So let me grab a bowl real quick. And that way it'll just be easier to grab. Okay, and I'll also be able to mix it and make sure that the consistency works for what I'm trying to do with it. Pull that little thing out. I always make a mess when I cook. Can't help it. I've always been a messy eater too. All right, so you've got quite a bit that's coated at the bottom. So I'm gonna make sure that I get all of that out. And I'm actually gonna kind of use my hands to squish it all together to make sure that it's all combined in a way that works. Okay. Oh yeah, this should bind actually pretty well together. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I've got my pan with my parchment paper. I love parchment paper. It's something I've come into the last few years. I use it for all kinds of things because it helps things to not stick, right? Okay, so I'm gonna take a little bit. I'm gonna smush it all together. Okay, I'm gonna put it on the tray. I'm gonna get all those done. I'm gonna stick them in the freezer for about 10 to 20 minutes. And let me show you what it's gonna turn out like. Yeah, see, that worked out pretty well right there. Bound together perfect. Didn't even have to add my coconut oil today. So I made some last night, and here's what they look like. They actually, and realize there's no bake, so you know it doesn't take any time to throw it in the oven. You can make it super quick, put it together, throw it in there, you've got something to take with you. Kind of looks like a no-bake cookie. Tastes really good. Honestly, something super easy to make, and if you have a chocolate moment, hopefully this will work for you. So please leave your comments below. Tell me if you tried it. Tell me if you love it. Tell me if you have another idea for us to put up here. You know, my goal is to make it easier for you to live a healthier life. So have an incredible weekend, you guys, and until next week, have at it. See you then.